Last talk in this session comes to us from James Dean, who is a member of our XRCC, and he is an immersion technology applications engineer here at APL, experienced developing immersive tech for several fields, including computational fluid dynamics and site field analyses. And he's going to be talking about XR device administration and authentication. The floor is yours.
All right, thank you. And this is going to be a really high-level overview of the hows, the whys, and the risks of dealing with administration and authentication for hardware or headsets at an enterprise level. And this should be pretty quick and short, but hopefully the laptop behaves itself. It doesn't like restart itself because you saw the update problem, but we'll see what happens. Anyway, so if you want to get into the nuts and bolts of actually how we're doing authentication and administration, talk to us offline a little bit, because this is going to be more high-level stuff. But to start with, why do we want to do enterprise level XR support? Well, because it's essential at this point in time. If you were in our morning talks in the main auditorium, like Blake has harked upon this, I have harked upon this with Wade, saying the technology for XR at this point have matured enough that you really seriously should be considering incorporating it into your work at this point in time. What I didn't say in that presentation was that not only should you as an individual or as a small team should be considering this, the enterprise of which you are part of should be very seriously having these conversations now at this point in time. Namely because, as it says here, of course, like this technology is no longer quirky, it's no longer gimmicky. It is now mainstream. It is becoming more mainstream. It is infecting how we do our work now. And the next bullet point is that it's going to affect your bottom line, ultimately speaking. The reason I bring up that second point about the bottom line is that what XR really is, in terms of visualization mindset, is it's a communication device. It is a device that communicates to you the data sets and information that you need to have in a contextful way without losing any of the context or fidelity of the information itself. It's not overloading you with information, it's just organizing it in a way that makes sense to you. And that is an excessively powerful capability of XR, because it facilitates much better communication between you as a developer, you as a manager, you as a sponsor, you as a non-expert, or you as a spokesperson who just wants to look at things, right? And having that higher level of communication amongst your team, amongst each other, amongst the whole enterprise, is really what optimizes efficiency throughout the whole process and the whole workflow of everything. So you want to have enterprise level support at the small scale and at the business level scale in order to make this really successful. And through that high level of communications and high quality communications and dialogue, you are now beginning to unlock and discover new opportunities that may present themselves. You throw out an idea that says, is this now feasible for us to do? Yes. What is the timetable for us to do this? It's this time. Can we throw in a quick model? Yes, we can. And those kind of features and capabilities allow the business and your team and your enterprise to evolve in ways that you probably never thought possible before, but ultimately comes back to invest in your bottom line. And so this slide here is, again, like, this is no longer a gimmick. This is things that you as a team and you as an enterprise very seriously needs to consider incorporating. Now, that said, there are significant risks to making a big investment here, okay? If you want to have enterprise level support, you have to have enterprise level investment. There's no way around that. And the biggest risk about this is the hype cycle. The first bullet point is beware the hype cycle. If you're not familiar with what the hype cycle is, think of it this way. When Facebook, parent company Meta, changed their names to Meta, they changed it because they wanted to control the metaverse. The metaverse was the new big word of the time. And the hype cycle says, what is the metaverse? It can be a lot of things that you want. It can be a lot of things you want to do. It's a global communication pipeline to bring in people, to bring in communications, to bring in office spaces, to bring in virtual worlds. And the hype cycle gets better and higher and higher and higher and higher. Then all of a sudden, people start actually trying to implement ways or implement the metaverse or implement tools they can to put into the metaverse. And now we begin to realize, well, it's not going to work as an office space. It's not going to work as a tool to visualize CAD models. It's not going to work. There's a lot of hurdles we have to face. There's a lot of like IP issues that we might have to deal with, like who owns the IPs and whatnot. Now we follow the trough of disillusionment where it's like, this is too hard, or there's too many hurdles. And at this point in time, using the metaverse as an example, at this point in time, pretty much everyone dropped any thinking or any consideration of incorporating something called a metaverse. So at this point in time, the metaverse no longer exists as we might think of it as of last year or so. But as the hype cycle continues on, eventually people are going to be coming back to it, or teams are going to be coming back to it, asking the question of, well, what can we actually do with this kind of concept or technology? And so, the hype cycle then curves up back to the plateau of productivity where we're actually building applications that are useful in the context of the technology itself. So I bring this up and talk about it at length because the second sub-bullet point, the first point, is don't use XR because XR is cool. We are well beyond that point. And the hype cycle had definitely fallen for VR. The hype cycle is currently coming back from the trough of disillusionment for AR right now. And if you're not clear-eyed about the hurdles or the bottlenecks or the problems you're going to face while you're pushing your enterprise to incorporate this technology, you are very likely going to fail because of the hype cycle. On top of that, there are a lot of hardware and software risks. Again, this is kind of like what are the hurdles you're going to be facing in terms of what the capabilities of the hardware has or what capabilities the software has. Do I need to develop software? How complex is the software do I need to develop? And as I mentioned, there's you're never going to have a one single application that's going to solve all of your problems. You will likely, if there are any commercially available applications available to you, you're likely going to have several of them. You have to figure out how to make them work together, or you're going to have to build them yourself. And on top of that, and this is something that isn't really mentioned often enough, is the user experience. First off, if anybody has used a headset for more than an hour and a half, you are tired and you are done. Your eyes strained, you're probably a little bit motion sick, you're sweaty, it's all hot in this headset and everything. But besides the motion sickness, the first impression that individuals get if you're trying to get them to adopt to the technology is by far the most important. If they're not sold within the first 5 or so minutes on the technology, it's going to be an upward climb to resell to them this application. And another thing too, I actually wanted to mention is a lot of the headsets and hardware technologies has been designed assuming a white bald male. It makes somewhat, okay, so from a starting standpoint, it does make sense at first because where do we even start to design these things? But because of this assumption that's being made, these headsets are not well designed for people who have a lot of hair, or people who wear religious headwear, or people who wear thick glasses, or people who simply have an afro, for example. And that's honestly very limiting in terms of adoptability for your teammates, for your colleagues, for anybody who wants to actually really adopt this technology. So I suspect it'll be less of a problem in the next 5 years as this becomes more and more ubiquitous, but this is a significant problem right now. With those risks kind of acknowledged, here are generally the best ways you want to kind of hedge your bets or manage those risks. First and foremost, again, don't do XR for XR's sake. Do it to solve the problems that you have. And the problems you have, you need to understand. If you want to understand what the problems you have to understand what are your objectives for your team, what are your objectives at the enterprise level, what are your goals, how are you doing things. And from there, you want to identify where the bottlenecks, where the challenges. Am I running into confusion because the communication pipeline's poor? Am I running into wasted time and wasted time and money spent because directions aren't clear? And these are sorts of things that you want to clarify and ensure outside of the concept of XR, just to have a standpoint of where can we actually find points of improvement, and then how to improve them, of course. Then once you have an idea of how you wish to improve these bottlenecks, then you can start bringing in the XR conversation and look at what kind of technology you can bring to the table that will solve your problems. Again, no single solution is going to solve all of your problems at once, but there may be some pieces of hardware or some not quite silver bullet that's going to solve maybe 80 to 90% of the problems you have now, and that will still be a huge benefit to your bottom line. But beyond that, really the biggest thing is communication. You really need to have an outreach, a way to outreach to all levels of your project team or your enterprise level like structure, and that has to be a continual dialogue that goes in all directions all the time. Effectively, this kind of dialogue will help keep all the teams and all the sponsors and all the stakeholders on the same page and aware of what's going on, such that when there is clarification necessary, everyone knows why the clarification is necessary and what is the clarification, and everybody's in agreement to it. And that helps build, improve iteration times. It helps optimize your turnaround time. It makes sure that the message is clear. And again, understand that there is no single technology that's going to resolve all your problems. You're going to find several bits and pieces that will solve a lot of your problems, but not all of them. And through that, it will also allow for the growth and adoption of XR technology, because more and more people are going to become aware of it and accepting of it once they understand what the risks already are through that dialogue. All right, so with all that said, I want to give an example here. The next couple slides is an example here of what a team I've been on have been doing to kind of handle these sorts of things, to kind of explore these things. And the reason we're doing this is because we know APL needs to have enterprise level support for this XR technology, because it's just coming down the pipe and we are already behind in some aspects. But we have no clue how that works at this point in time. Maybe a year ago we didn't have any clue. We have a better clue now. So this team was put together as a small team to kind of explore and understand, one, how do we manage these devices on an enterprise level? Two, is it feasible for us to even manage these at an enterprise level? Three, what does it even mean to manage these devices at an enterprise level? And on top of all of that is, how do we set up the infrastructure to do so? How do we do the technical detail to make this a streamlined process for all of APL, which is 9,000 people? How do we identify, or can we identify, the kinds of needs and desires that these teams or groups of teams or individuals need to have in order to make sure that their work is successful, right? And also, can we explore if the applications that we have to do these things are feasible themselves? So we wanted to set out to identify the kind of technologies that's available, and building the expertise and kind of establish that multi-layer communication pipeline with the team, with the individual, and with the whole enterprise to be like, this is what we're doing, here are the problems, here's what's capable, here's what's not capable, and help APL as a whole begin to adopt this technology, and again, bottom line, support at an enterprise level. So how are we doing this exactly? Well, we set out to find a couple of headsets. Well, we did a search on figure out what are the best headsets to use, what's the best software to use, what are the existing enterprise headset management software that we can use, these sorts of things to start with. Because again, this is really uncharted territory for us at this point in time. And we find out that this is when the Quest 2 headset was very popular at a consumer level. They are probably the easiest headsets to manage and maintain and to deploy and deliver at this point in time, because they're such easy form factors, even with the hangups of them being designed with a bald male human being. Then on top of that, because we chose the Quest 2 headsets for this level, we decided to stick with the Meta brand in this case, as they provided an application called Horizon Workrooms. What Horizon Workrooms is a VR office space meeting application. You put on a headset, you log into your account, you pop into the Meta Workroom, and you are in a virtual semi-small conference space where you can have effectively a virtual Zoom meeting with your colleagues. They provide things like a whiteboard, they provide things like sharing your laptop screen, and you can have a much more personal dialogue with your colleagues in this space than you would normally through Zoom or something like that. It also has Zoom-like features, which you can kind of see in this smaller image here. But in terms of device administration, we did a small search and found that ArborXR looked to be the most useful to us. ArborXR is a third-party vendor that provides a web interface on their cloud services to do device hardware and software management. It's fairly simple to use and fairly simple to set up. And the nice feature about this kind of application is that if there is a custom application that you or your team have developed, you can upload it onto this system and it will get pushed to all of the headsets that are managed in your network here. So it's very easy to tell the status of the headsets, their battery strength of the headsets, are they turned on, what application are they currently running, what is the user doing in this headset, that sort of thing. It's actually very, very simple. And that helped us a lot with at least understanding, is it feasible for us to do enterprise level device management? Now, there were some headaches and some issues. We expected to have a lot of headaches here because, again, this is uncharted territory and we are asking groups of APL teams to come back to us, use these headsets, run a meeting, and come back to us to be like, what worked, what did not, what did you want, what did you not want from this? And the overarching lesson that we have here is that any barrier of entry, no matter how small, is a significant barrier of entry. Again, earlier I mentioned that the first 5 minutes, even 3 minutes of your initial impression for a user is going to be the longest lasting one. And right off the bat, we ran into a lot of barriers or headaches with account management or account setups for the individual. And of course, if you're familiar with how Meta likes to do their accounts, and this is before they decided that you no longer have to have a Facebook account tied to your Meta account, we had to ask individuals if they're willing to have a Facebook account created or tied to the account that they want to use. Half of them said no, absolutely not. And it's rightfully so. And then thankfully, halfway through this process, Meta decided, you no longer need to have a Facebook account. So we're like, we can explore this now again. But the account creation process on its own it's a major barrier of entry. And that's not even talking about like exploring or using XR technology in this case. Other examples, other issues, lessons learned, were that while Horizon Workrooms is a simple interface to log into and set up and then communicate with your colleagues for a productive meeting, there are a lot of features and hurdles to actually make it truly productive. For example, there are a couple of other applications designed for conference communications or conference speaking and even office meeting speaking that can bring in three-dimensional CAD models and allows you to explore the CAD models in some generally basic form. Horizon Workrooms had none of that. It still does not. What they do have, again, is a whiteboard that you can draw on and a mechanism for you to bring your laptop, your physical laptop, to log into it as a screen share and then show it on the blackboard. And while those features are okay, the problem is that you have to have your laptop connected to the same system on your same network with your same account and then also VPN'd, not really VPN, but VPN enough, into the Horizon Workrooms in order to be able to even use your screen. And then additionally, they treated your laptop or your computer device as the source of data transfer. And all you can really transfer was a PDF or images or static notes. Nothing more complex than that. And a lot of the feedback we got for teams who were using this were like, we would very much like to bring in 3D models, to bring in more complex data sets, and be able to do on-the-fly data analysis because, hey, I need to do a quick, dirty analysis on this complex data set to get an answer real quick. And the only way we can get to anywhere near that point was to have a person bring up the application on their laptop and then share the screen on the laptop, which why use this when you can just do this on Zoom? Which is much easier, much simpler to get into. So limited capabilities, and ultimately Horizon Workrooms is really not ready at this point in time for a productive meeting at a small scale, let alone enterprise. It's not nearly ready for an enterprise. But all in all, this is really just to say that the level of communication at an enterprise level on multiple levels and multiple scales between multiple teams, between your management and the developers and the sponsors and the stakeholders, that is by far and away the most critical component to ensuring that you are successful in adopting XR at the enterprise level. So I know I said that like 4 or 5 times now, and I'm going to repeat it again. But yeah, that's effectively how you can manage and ensure that XR adoption in your workplace is successful with as minimal barriers or hurdles as possible. So I know that was super, super quick, but I think that's all I have for now. Again, if you want to get into like nitty-gritty details on how we're doing this, how we're doing authentication and administration at a detailed level, I am open for questions. I have Blake here, who's also part of this too. So feel free to ask away. Yeah?
Did you evaluate any other types of like collaboration tools?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, how many did we evaluate?
Oh my gosh.
Like 20, 30, like, there's millions of them, and most of them are bad.
Yeah. There are, to ensure that APL doesn't show bias towards any particular application, I would say there are a handful of them that seem successful, but are only specific to the context of the work. So if your meeting context is, we need to look at a CAD model, there's 2 applications that will be successful. But if your meeting is, we need to have a short discussion on a data feed that's coming in real time, there's none of them that will be able to do that to our knowledge. So, yep. I'm sorry, do you have another follow-up question?
No, I'll follow up with you afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Not an easy question, but how would you decide whether what you described is worth doing, like in terms of not necessarily like a return on investment, but it seems like, I mean, I know a little bit about this stuff, and the amount of upfront investment and the labor and the resources you'd have to dedicate, you would need a sizable number of people to use it.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
I mean, a lot.
You're asking the chicken and egg problem. Which comes first? At least in the XR team's experience, we started out small. And we knew that at the time, we're not going to be able to throw our weight around and convince like executive level management to be like, you should be doing this. That's just a road for failure. What we did do, however, is say, please allow us a small risk. That if we fail, we will fail, it will be done. But if we succeed, then we'll start showcasing how we're succeeding and keeping track of our successes and keeping track of how much we're saving or how much we're benefiting. And being aware of how we are optimizing the things we're doing is probably paramount to go to the higher level management and be like, this is how we're saving money. For an example, Blake here has created a Unity asset repository that's internal to the lab. And we've been curating it and building upon it for the last, 4 or 5 years now? Something like that? 3 years? We have 500 different assets.
Yeah, we have about $13,000 worth of assets in there.
$13,000 worth of assets. We've had enough, so he's been keeping track of this, but effectively we have more than $5,000 or $6,000 saved.
Oh no.
More than that?
45.
40, okay. So to give you an estimate, or to keeping track of how we're benefiting it, if we did not keep this asset database updated and curated and kept track and provided that and communicated to APL enterprise level stuff, then individuals will have to be continually purchasing the same assets over and over and over again. So that turns into over cost, and as Blake just said, $45,000 over the last 3 years that we just saved because of that alone. So to kind of circle back to your question, the way that we have done this is we start out small with small successes, and we highlight those small successes, and we build upon those small successes to come back to the way that we work to say, how much benefit are we now achieving because of these smaller successes? And then we build upon those smaller successes to larger ones and larger ones and larger ones, and it feeds it back into how are we benefiting from the original way we were doing this work. And eventually, people will begin to pay attention. This is this XR Symposium. Yep.
I'm wondering if you encountered any solutions to the universal headset problem. It's a very difficult thing to solve.
Oh.
Close to that is sort of like doing the opera glasses thing where you have a handle and hold it up to your face.
Oh gosh.
My solution is it can't be solved. I think is, when we start talking about devices and making devices, there is no one size fits all. These things are just too personal. But I think, building on the themes that we were talking about previously, designing systems or using systems that are built to be device agnostic is really where the golden spot is. One of the nice things about the Quest 2, and one of the advantages of having a headset that is so widely adopted, is you can get a bunch of different aftermarket head straps, right?
Mhm.
And so if you have somebody who, maybe has a mohawk and doesn't want to squish down their mohawk, right? That they don't want that top strap, you can get like an around the head thing that doesn't have that top strap. And so then it's just the headset, and then you can put whatever aftermarket strap you want. But really, ideally, we like avoiding vendor lock-in wherever possible. And so if we can have an application, and some of the applications we explored, because we explored dozens of them, were multi-platform, and that's better. Horizon Workers, the big downside is that is meta devices only.
Yeah.
And the device management side, do you guys manage multiple different classes of devices, or do you do different tools for that?
Yeah, this is more of an exploratory phase right now, so I can't answer right now if we are currently exploring multiple or handling multiple classes of devices. We do want to, because we, again, as Blake just said, we want to be completely agnostic of the headset we have for support. But being as this is more early on exploratory, currently we're limited to just the Quest 2 headsets. Now, I will say that Arbor XR, and I think there's another application I'm forgetting the name of that does device administration like this. They are by design agnostic as well, but the underlying problems with that is vendor lock-in. If we want to deploy an application that was designed or built for one specific headset by some external third-party vendor, then we don't have control over what headset that vendor supports. Nor do we have control over, can we actually have our own executable from them to deploy to the headsets. We actually have to go to the vendor and be like, please deploy for us to these headsets. So it's less of a hardware software problem, more of a contract problem, IP problem.
Business problem.
Yeah. Anything else? No? All right, let me let you go here. It's been an afternoon. Thank you all for joining us.